Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for joining us today on our webinar for the findings from the 2026 Charity Job Salary Report. It's great to have you all on the call with us. My name is Zach, and I'm the Research Manager here at CharityJob, working alongside my colleague Jinsha, conducting research to help us understand our recruiter and candidate users and the wider market as a whole. We use the insights to create reports, blogs, and webinars that inform recruiters about trends and best practice for attracting and retaining talent in the sector. We've worked closely with our colleague James, our Director of Data and Analytics on this project, who has led the analysis of the salary report, and he's on hand today to answer any data questions. Claire, our Marketing Director, is also here today to help us with the Q&A later on.
And hello everyone, my name is Jinsha and I'm Senior Research Executive at CharityJob. I've been at CharityJob for around 2 years now, and I play a key role helping us understand our customers and monitoring market trends. And I'm really excited to share these insights with you today from our 2026 salary report.
So now we're just going to go through a few bits of housekeeping before we kick off. So firstly, please pop any questions you may have into the Q&A panel. Claire will be keeping an eye out for those, and we'll try to answer as many of those questions as we can at the end of the webinar. So don't worry if you don't get an immediate response to those questions, but we'll get to them later. The webinar is being recorded, so please only share your questions if you're happy for them to be on the recording, and we'll share the recording of this webinar and the webinar slides to all those registered later today. So what we'll cover, we're going to start by taking you through the methodology of our salary report and the changes we've made to our methodology this year. We'll then go through some of the overarching trends we've seen in the recruitment market before going through main salary trends in the individual job categories. And in there, we'll be pulling out a few standout insights within each. After that, we'll explore some key findings from our volunteer roles, contract and part-time roles, senior level roles, and then long-term trends from the past decade. We'll then briefly discuss the demographic profile of charity job candidates and highlight any standout differences we saw across the job categories. And finally, we'll wrap up with some summary and conclusion points before moving on to the Q&A.
The CharityJob 2026 salary report is based on more than 55,000 roles from the sector posted on our CharityJob site in 2025. This comprises more than 30,300 full-time or annual salaried roles, around 8,000 part-time paid roles, and more than 17,300 volunteer roles. We also include data on candidate demographics from more than 85,000 candidates, which has been collected from our Equal Opportunities reporting tool. And today we'll compare to our data from 2024 to see how things have changed year on year, and we'll also look at comparisons from the last 5 years and decade when interesting. Categories such as experience levels are fixed breakdowns that roles are matched to. So in some instances, categories are selected by recruiters when they post a job with us. And for some of the further breakdowns, we have used logic to categorize roles to the best available category based on a set of criteria. In terms of data accuracy, the data we talk through today is based on a very large number of roles and has been reviewed by our data and insights team, and we're confident it reflects the sector closely. It is possible that there could be some potential limitations, but we have taken precautions to minimize the impact of these where possible. And when we talk about candidate demand, we're referring to the number of clicks on the apply button that a job gets. Finally, we have categorized jobs by charity size in this report. For most of the webinar and the report, we break down to small, medium, and large. So small is 20 or fewer employees, medium is 21 to 100 employees, and large is 101 or more employees. And in other places, we've provided a more detailed breakdown by headcount. And to align with sector analysis and government reports, average salaries are measured as the median rather than the mean. And in addition to this, we've also incorporated a new logic of classification of categories and subcategories of jobs, using a range of inputs used such as job title and keywords. And we've incorporated a new set of criteria to ensure our reporting is accurate. We've also included interquartile salary ranges in our report this year, and we may also discuss this in the webinar. and more information about the methodology can be found in the full report.
So now it's time to talk about some of the trends in the charity recruitment market. So the graph on this slide shows the number of jobs posted on our site from 2019 to 2025, and the average number of clicks on apply received from candidates over the same time period. The number of jobs is the blue line, and clicks on apply is the pink or red line here. And as you can see, the number of jobs posted decreased significantly in 2020, of course, due to the impacts of the COVID pandemic, but started to increase again in 2021. Then, in 2022, as the UK came out of the pandemic, the number of jobs skyrocketed, and there the UK experienced a candidate-driven market where there was more job vacancies than the candidates available to fill them. In 2023, we saw the recruitment market stabilizing, with the number of jobs decreasing and candidate interest increasing. Now, last year, in 2025, we saw a continued decrease in the number of jobs posted, so that was down by 18%, and a continued increase in the candidate interest. There was a 37% increase in clicks on the apply button. That's all suggesting a shift to a recruiter-led market where recruiters have more say. This trend was consistent with similar trends and figures being reported by the ONS, Indeed, and Reed, reporting decreases of 23% and 26% year on year. So now we're going to look at some of the key trends from last year specifically. So the median salary for a job posted on the CharityJob website in 2025 was 36,000, and that was a 3% increase from 2024. Although at the same time, the number of jobs actually decreased by 18%, as mentioned, from 2024. So we had over 30,300 full-time paid or annual salaried roles posted, and that decrease in the number of roles is in line with national trends. Looking at the salaries by location, so we're going to look at London versus outside of London. We saw the median salary for a role in London was just over 38,750. This was 21% higher than the median salary for a role outside of London, which was just over 32,000. Median salaries inside and outside of London increased by 2% and 6% respectively year on year. And salaries outside of London increased more than those in London for all job categories except for finance, which we'll go into later. London roles actually received around 2.5 times more clicks on apply than jobs posted outside of London, which we thought was notable. We also saw variation in the differences in the interquartile range of London versus outside. So this is the first year we've added interquartile ranges to our salary report, and it adds a new layer of insight depth, as you can see here with the upper and lower ranges to our median bandings. That's indicating the spread of salary ranges more broadly. We also found there were slight changes in working arrangements in 2025. So the proportion of jobs that were hybrid working increased slightly from 50 to 51%, while the proportion of jobs which are on-site decreased from 38 to 36%. And then we're going to go on to some reflections of preferred working methods later on in the webinar as well.
Thank you, Zach. So this year we've collaborated with the Living Wage Foundation again to understand how charity salaries compare. So the living wage calculated by the Living Wage Foundation reflects the actual cost of living, so covering essentials like food, housing and transport. So the living wage is separate to the government's national living wage, which isn't calculated according to the cost of living and is lower than what people need to afford a decent quality of life. So as per the Living Wage Foundation, the real UK living wage is £13.45 an hour, and the real London living wage is £14.80 an hour. So therefore, for the purpose of this report, we calculated the living wage as £26,228 for jobs outside of London and £28,860 for jobs in London. And this is based on a 37.5-hour work week. So within the next part of the webinar, we'll be looking at key salary trends across the 9 job categories. Please note that to keep to time, we're only focusing on areas where there's been something interesting to report on, but more information and a more detailed breakdown of the data can be found in the full salary report.
Perfect. Thank you, Jinsha. So the first category we're going to deep dive into is admin. In 2025, the median salary for a role in the admin category was stagnant at 30,000. So therefore, there's no real material increase from the year before. However, there was a 21% decrease in the roles available to just over 2,700 in 2025. And that follows a 20% decrease on the year prior as well. But overall, this was in line with the overarching decrease in the number of jobs on our site and not actually especially affected despite the increase in things such as automation that happened with this category. This next slide shows the average salary for admin roles by experience levels and charity size. So just to remind you again how we classify charity size, small charities have a headcount of 20 or fewer employees. Medium charities have a headcount of 21 to 100 employees, and large charities have 101 employees or more. In this graph, we've not included data from roles at the senior exec and director levels due to the very low numbers of admin roles at those levels. But moving on to the data. So our data shows that the median and large salaries charities paid the most for all experience levels compared to smaller size charities.
So the next category is business services. And this category includes roles in business development, IT, training, and vocational/service roles. So the median salary for a role in the business services category was 40,000, so a 5% increase from 2024. At the same time, the number of jobs in business services decreased by 14%, although this was still the job category with the highest number of jobs in 2025. Looking at average salary by subcategories, the business development subcategory had the highest overall average salary by a fair margin. And we've excluded the average salary for the training subcategory here due to limited data. Looking at average salary by experience level and organisation size, large charities broadly paid the most for all levels of seniority, with the exception of management level where medium charities paid the most. We also saw that director level roles in large charities paid 46% higher than those in small charities.
Thank you, Jinsha. So now we'll be moving on to the finance discipline. So finance was the highest paying category with a median salary of £48,000, although this was actually down 4% from 2024. Finance was the only category to see a decrease in salary from the year prior. However, it remained the highest paying job category overall. We saw the number of job roles drop by 16%. And as with other job categories, candidate demand for the finance roles continued to increase in 2025, but they still received the lowest number of clicks on apply. We found the likely reason for this is because finance roles tend to attract a smaller but more qualified pool of candidates. And then location-wise, median salaries for finance roles in London remained flat, while salaries outside of London increased by 7%. So that was reducing the London premium for this discipline from 25% to 17%. Although the number of roles decreased more outside of London than within, so we saw 18% decrease compared to a 12% decrease in London. Hybrid roles had the highest median salary of 50,000 compared to 47,000 for remote roles and around 40,900 for on-site roles. So on-site finance roles, saw the biggest decline in both pay, which was down 9%, and volume, which was down 27%, which suggests a continued shift away from that traditional on-site only finance roles. Looking at salary breakdown by experience level and organisation size, Large and medium-sized charities showed a mixture of salaries across all experience levels, although larger charities offered more at the most senior levels.
So now moving on to fundraising, which was our category with the second highest number of jobs. So the median salary for a fundraising role was around 40,000, and this was a 5% increase from 2024. Jobs in fundraising compared to jobs in other categories saw lower demand amongst candidates overall, with 44% fewer clicks on apply compared to the overall average for all jobs in 2025. And this data highlights an ongoing challenge within the fundraising sector. There are loads of jobs, but not enough candidates applying to them. So in light of this, we are conducting further research into this topic and will be releasing the findings in the coming months. Now deep diving into subcategories, major donors and legacies paid the highest overall, with the median salary of 45,000. And this subcategory also had a higher upper quartile than other fundraising subcategories, showing greater earning potential. In contrast, community and events paid the least, with a median of 33,000 and a relatively compressed salary range. And other fundraising subcategories tended to cluster around a median approaching 40,000, without much variation by organisation size. When looking at salary breakdowns by experience level, large charities paid the most for all experience levels except for senior executive and junior level positions, where small-sized charities paid the most. And looking at working arrangement breakdowns, hybrid roles paid the most, with a median of 40,000, closely followed by remote roles. And both role types saw an increase in salary compared to 2024. On-site roles paid the least and saw a 3% decrease in median salary, now just over at 35,000.
So now we'll be looking at HR, which is currently the job category with the fewest number of jobs posted. So in 2025, the median salary for an HR role was 40,000, and that represented a 11% increase from 2024, which was actually the largest increase, in fact, as well. We saw that there were less roles overall, but in particular, there were less junior roles in this space, and therefore it kind of led to a more senior selection of HR roles being advertised. Interestingly, we also saw that remote and hybrid roles paid 25% more than on-site HR roles, and that's somewhat similar to the trend in finance as well. Salaries outside London increased more than those in London, with 9% compared to 5%, and the number of jobs posted in London fell more, which was 28% compared to 17%. This meant that compared to last year, there was an overrepresentation of HR roles outside of London. That was bringing the overall median salary down, as bear in mind this is quite a small job category. Junior and entry-level roles in London decreased most dramatically by 48% and 33% year on year, respectively. And together, these trends suggest that HR may be becoming less London-centric. Looking into salary breakdowns, large charities had higher salaries for most experience levels, except the entry and graduate levels, where medium-sized charities paid the most. Again, we've excluded data for director and CEO levels and senior exec salaries for medium-sized charities here, as we did earlier, due to limited data.
So moving on to our next category, marketing, PR and digital. This category encompasses marketing, communications/PR and digital positions. The median salary for this category was 39,000 and saw a 4% increase in 2025. Jobs posted decreased by 16%, and roles in this category had an average of 93 clicks on apply, placing it among the more competitive job categories. Overall, jobs in the communications and PR subcategory had a higher average salary than those in digital or marketing. Communications and PR in large charities paid the most at around 42,000 on average, and marketing roles at small charities paid the least at around 35,000. We also looked at salary breakdowns by experience level, and again, due to the limited data for director and CEO roles in medium and small size charities, we've left those levels out. Large charities paid the most for all experience levels, except for senior executive roles, where small charities paid the most. And hybrid roles paid the most with a median salary of 40,000, closely followed by remote roles at 39,500. On-site roles paid the least with a median of 37,000 and saw the smallest increase in salary from 2024. And median salaries increased by 3% both in London and outside London, but London's median was still higher at 40,000 compared to 35,000 for outside London.
Thank you, Jinsha. So the next category is operations, which includes project management roles. Here, the median salary for a role in this category was around 31,000 in 2025, and that's a 3% increase from the year before. We found jobs posted decreased by 21%, and operations was the category with the second lowest number of jobs roles available. Within this category, operations roles paid 13% more than project management roles at the median, and in both subcategories, large charities had higher median salaries. Looking at median salaries by experience levels, salaries tended to be relatively similar by charity size, although then salary growth became more sort of pronounced after and then within the management levels.
Our next category encompasses policy/research, advocacy, governance, and campaigns positions. The median salary for roles in this category was £36,260 in 2025 and had a 4% increase from the year before that. There were just over 2,000 jobs posted in 2025, which was an 18% decrease from the year before. And this category had the third highest clicks on apply, with an average of 95 clicks on apply per role. Looking at the subcategory salaries, governance had an overall higher average salary compared to the other subcategories, but it was particularly higher in large charities. For all subcategories, large-sized charities paid the most, except for advocacy, where small-sized charities paid higher. And due to the limited data, we can't provide salary data breakdown by charity sizes for director and CEO roles. We saw that junior and entry-level/graduate roles paid slightly higher in medium-sized charities. However, for most levels, there were relatively equal salary propositions available across all charity sizes. And when comparing salaries by location, we saw London-based roles paid 23% more than outside London roles, and both London and outside London salaries grew in 2025.
Now moving on to our final job category, which is support work. And this category encompasses roles in advice or information, social care/development, social work, and support worker roles. Here, the median salary for this category was 30,000 in 2025, which was showing as a 1% increase from the year prior. Jobs posted decreased by 21%, which is actually the same percent as last year, although this category actually had the third highest number of roles overall. Among the support worker subcategories, social work showed the greatest salary variation, with both the lowest lower quartile and the highest upper quartile, i.e. the biggest range, although support roles overall was showed as the lowest paid job category alongside admin. So, as you can see here, small charities were typically paying slightly more than large, aside from social work, that is. And social work was the subcategory that had the highest overall salary compared to other subcategories within support work. The support work category had the highest proportion of on-site roles of all job categories, with 59%. That's over 2,700 roles, compared to an average of 36% across all jobs posted. So looking at salaries by seniority level and organisation size, there was not much variation in salaries paid between large, medium and small. We also had limited data for the director and CEO levels, and only insights for the large-sized charities for senior exec. Salaries were relatively compressed at junior levels, with larger pay ranges at the management and senior exec levels.
Thank you, Zach. So we've now come to the end of the job category section, and we'll now dive deeper into some further breakdowns. So in the next section of the webinar, we'll be looking at salary trends and working arrangements within different types of roles. So volunteer roles, contract and part-time roles, and more. And we'll be looking at what the changes have been throughout the years. And again, due to the limited time we have, we'll only be covering headline insights, but more detail can be found from the report. So one thing we looked at is salaries in comparison to the real living wage provided by the Living Wage Foundation. So just to remind everyone again, we calculated the full-time living wage salary based on a 37.5-hour work week, which calculates to £26,228 for jobs outside of London and to £28,860 for jobs within London. And we saw that 34% of the full-time entry-level and junior roles within London paid below the London living wage, and 33% of full-time entry-level and junior roles outside of London paid below the UK living wage.
Thank you, Ginger. So now moving on to volunteer roles. So despite the number of paid roles decreasing, we saw an increase of 5% in the number of volunteer roles posted through our site. So it's going from around 16,600 to around 17,400 in 2025. We saw the business services category had the highest number of volunteer roles with more than 4,000, closely followed by fundraising, which had around 3,900, and then support work roles with 2,200 or just over. The majority of volunteer roles are on site, and more than a total of both hybrid and remote roles combined. We did see a 6% increase in the number of remote volunteer roles, although no change in the hybrid volunteer roles. This is also in line with the NCVO's Time Well Spent research, which found that almost 20% of new volunteers are volunteering exclusively online. And this highlights that volunteer roles are becoming more flexible as well, which might accommodate the needs for some people, and it could possibly help in attracting more volunteers. Roles in London were more popular on average than those in other locations.
And besides full-time roles and volunteer roles, we also have a significant number of contract and part-time roles posted on our site. So in total, we had just over 7,900 roles, in which 243 of these were contract roles and 7,600 were part-time roles. And these roles accounted for 26% of all jobs posted on the CharityJob website, so up quite substantially at 12% on last year as a proportion of total roles. However, similar to our trends for full-time positions, we also saw a decline in the number of contract and part-time roles, which decreased by 16% from 2024 to 2025. And we also saw that London had the highest number of contract and part-time roles compared to other locations. Looking at working arrangements, most roles were either hybrid or on-site roles with 46% and 38%, and remote roles made up 16%. Furthermore, looking at the breakdowns of the number of roles by charity size, we saw that small charities have the highest number of contract and part-time roles, representing 38% of those types of roles, even though the total number of roles in small-sized charities were less than medium and large-sized charities. And this indicates that contract and part-time roles may be relatively more important for small-sized charities. potentially helping them to manage capacity and cost pressures alongside flexibility. And looking at salary changes, most categories of contract and part-time roles saw a salary growth, with the exception of finance, where median pay fell by 7%, and fundraising, where salaries remained flat.
So now moving on to senior roles. So here we're focusing on trends within CEO, C-suite, director and assistant director, and head of roles. So overall, we saw a decrease of 9% for senior roles in 2025, with over 1,600 senior level roles posted on CharityJob. That's a larger decrease than last year, but overall a smaller decrease when compared with the 18% decrease across all jobs. Looking into salary breakdowns for senior level roles, C-suite roles have the highest median salary of 80,000. And that can be explained by the large number of chief financial officer roles we have in this category, which usually pays more than other roles in this sector. CEO roles at small charities with less funding are comparatively overrepresented on our site, as seen in the next slide we'll go into. And of these small charities, not all will recruit for many other senior level roles, and that essentially affects the median salary levels. Head of roles had the lowest median salary, paying around 60,400 a year. We also look further into the number of senior level roles by charity size. And as you may be able to tell, small charities posted more senior roles than medium and large charities. For CEO level, specifically, 53% of roles were within small charities. Looking into C-suite salary breakdowns, CFO roles paid the highest, with a median salary of £85,000. But even here, they had the largest decline, with a reduction of 15% compared with 2024. CEO roles saw the lowest median salary with 68,000. Most senior roles were based in London, and there were 732, compared to areas outside of London.
So, in the past decade, the job market has undergone important changes due to economic factors, societal changes, technology, the continued impact of the pandemic, and more. So, for this next section, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the more significant changes that the job market has undergone in the past years. So, firstly, these two graphs show the number of jobs posted by job category over a 10-year period from 2015 to 2025, and the average number of clicks on the apply button during the same period. And the different lines represent different job categories, but as you can see, they broadly follow a similar trends. Looking at the graph on the left on number of jobs, we can see a big dip in postings in 2020, which was due to the impacts of the COVID pandemic. And at the same time, when we look at the graph on the right, we can see a large increase in candidate demand. And then in 2021 and 2022, we saw increase in the number of jobs while candidate demand decreased, creating a candidate-driven market. And since 2022, we can see the recruitment market has shifted. So the number of jobs posted declined while clicks on apply increased. And in 2025, we saw the number of jobs drops slightly below their pre-pandemic 2019 level. And this, alongside increasing clicks on apply, has led to a slightly recruiter-led market. And this graph shows salary growth over the decade. So there was a median 3.1% annual salary increase looking across the decade. However, it's important to note that this wasn't a consistent trend. So some years saw much larger salary increases and others were flat. And 2021 even saw a decrease in median salaries. And over the past decade, we've also seen some changes in the type of roles posted on our site. So notably, the volume of policy advocacy, governance and campaigns roles has grown to 2,053 roles.
Thank you, Jinsha. And now moving on to our next section, where we'll look at the demographic profile of our candidates. So in June 2024, we introduced equal opportunities reporting on our platform. So with permission from candidates, we collect their demographic data, which is then anonymized. When recruiters use CharityJob Apply method to manage their recruitment processes, if they have over 5 applications, they are automatically able to access their equal opportunities reporting to help them prevent bias. We've had nearly 86,000 candidates complete this process, and this is where the following data comes from. We'll talk you through the headline demographics, but there is, of course, more detail in the report itself. So within our respondents, 67% of them were female and 28% were male, 1.4% non-binary, 0.2% trans male, 0.1% trans female, and 3% registered as other. This is in line with the NCVO statistics on gender breakdown in the voluntary sector. And looking at age, so 78% of our candidates were between the ages of 25 to 54, 13% were under the age of 24, and the rest were above the age of 55 or chose other. And looking at ethnicity breakdown, so nearly half were from a white background, followed by 20% who were from a Black African Caribbean / Black British background, 16% from an Asian background, 1% of Arabic ethnicity, and 6% of multiple ethnic groups. Our ethnicity breakdown therefore shows that we see a higher diversity in the charity job sector compared to national employment in general. More than 3/4 of our candidates didn't identify as having a disability. 15% said yes, and 7% registered as other.
Thank you, Zach. And we looked across our equal opportunities data to see if any candidates were more likely to apply for certain roles than others. And we saw quite a few differences across demographic groups, which we've included in the full report, but for now, we're just going to pull out some of the standout insights. So most notably, we saw that men were more likely to apply for on-site roles than any other working arrangements, whereas women were more likely to apply for remote roles. And we saw that those aged 65 or over were more likely to apply to finance roles than any other job categories. And another feature that CharityJob offers is anonymous recruitment. And this hides an applicant's names and replaces it with a pseudonym during the initial candidate screening to help recruiters to remove any bias associated with an applicant's name. We saw that jobs with anonymous recruitment were more in demand overall. So they received 117% more clicks on apply than roles without anonymous recruitment. So an average of 141 compared to 65 clicks on apply. We cross-analysed clicks on the apply button for roles using anonymous recruitment against candidate demographic data to identify whether certain groups were more likely to apply for these roles. And we saw that trans candidates were more likely to apply for any role which used anonymous recruitment. And this may be because trans candidates feel more protected from bias when it's used, as research conducted by Total Jobs found that 56% of trans candidates believed it was harder for them to find a job, and 33% said they experienced discrimination in job interviews and applications. We also saw that younger candidates, so those aged between 25 to 34, were represented in a slightly higher share of applicants for senior executive roles when anonymous recruitment was used. And older candidates were more likely to apply for all types of roles.
Thank you, Jinsha. So what kind of roles are most in demand from candidates? Firstly, and most significantly, remote roles are the most popular type of working arrangement. On average, they get 7 times more clicks on apply than on-site roles and 4 times more clicks on apply than hybrid roles. So candidates are looking for roles where there's flexibility, which remote and hybrid roles offer. Our most competitive job categories were operations, admin and policy, advocacy, and governments and campaigns, and with many of these roles receiving over 100 clicks on apply. At the other end of the spectrum, the least popular job categories were finance and fundraising. These had 32 and 34 clicks on apply on average. And for finance roles, we believe this reflects that they tend to attract a smaller pool of candidates, more qualified candidates, when we believe that for fundraising roles, it's more of a reflective of a skills shortage in the discipline. Looking at variations within locations, London roles were the most popular compared to outside London roles, with 3 times more clicks on apply. And finally, we saw that roles using anonymous recruitment, where applicants' names are replaced with pseudonyms, were much more popular, with 92% more clicks on apply than roles that didn't use anonymous recruitment.
So in December, we surveyed CharityJob candidates to better understand the benefits they receive in their current roles and which ones they value the most. So we received responses from more than 2,800 respondents. And so this next section focuses primarily on respondents working in the UK charity sector, alongside wider candidate preferences where relevant. So we have collected additional information on benefits and flexibility preferences, and we'll just run through some of these highlights next. So the top 3 common benefits received by candidates working in the UK charity sector were 25 days plus annual leave received by 76%, followed by flexibility of working hours and location at 70%, and remote working options at 64%. And more than half received free tea and coffee as one of their benefits, and 48% received mental health and well-being support. And some of the benefits less commonly received included share purchase options and unlimited paid leave. And these findings suggest that many charity employers already offer a baseline benefits package that includes enhanced annual leave, flexibility, and well-being support. And looking more closely at flexibility, the most common flexible working options available to charity sector candidates were remote or hybrid flexibility, which was selected by 59%. And more than half selected flexi time and compressed work week, work from anywhere flexibility, and flexible office attendance all were within a few percentage of each other. And just to note here that work from anywhere flexibility refers to having the option of working in cafes or co-working spaces, and is different to work from abroad policy, which refers to being able to working from a different country. And the findings for that is included in the full report.
So, which benefits do candidates value? So all UK-based respondents were asked to select the 5 benefits and perks most critical to them when considering job opportunities. The most valued benefits were 25 days plus annual leave, flexibility in terms of working hours and locations, remote working options, training and development opportunities, and health insurance. If we compare this with the earlier information a few slides back, we can see that in fact the top 3 benefits received match those that were cited as most desirable. Training and development opportunities was found to be the 6th most widely received benefit, although health insurance is not as common and sits down at 13th most popular benefit received.
Candidates were also asked how important different factors were when considering job opportunities, including salary, flexibility, culture, and the organisation's mission. So through this, we found that 52% rated salary as very important, and a further 39% rated it as important. However, non-pay factors were just as important. So organisation culture was considered as very important by 51%. 50% rated flexibility of working hours or location as very important. And remote working opportunities were rated as very important by 47%. And overall, these findings suggest that while salary matters, candidates typically assess job opportunities holistically, so balancing pay with flexibility, culture, and organisational values.
Thank you, Jinsha. So now as we're coming towards the end of the webinar, we wanted to highlight some key takeaways from the CharityJob Salary Report 2026. We saw a continued recruiter-led market through 2025 up to 2026, with further increases in candidate activity and decreases in the number of jobs. The median salary for a charity role increased by 3% in 2025 to 36,000, even though a significant proportion of entry-level and junior roles are yet to meet the real living wage threshold. We've seen changes within working arrangements, shifts towards more flexible approach with the growth in hybrid roles and decrease in on-site roles. And despite a decrease in the number of full-time roles, volunteer roles saw a 5% increase, with a shift towards more flexible volunteering, with increases in the number of remote and hybrid volunteer roles. Finally, the new equal opportunity data that we have offers us fresh insights into the profile of candidates in the charity sector and now emerging trends in application patterns. Thank you so much for listening, and we're going to hand over to Claire for the Q&A. And just a reminder, for all the questions we don't get to answer now, we'll follow up with you directly afterwards. So yeah.
Morning, everyone. Thanks very much for attending the webinar. Thanks to Jinsha and Zach for going over all the information. And also apologies for the sound issues that we were having at the beginning of the webinar. I'm not entirely sure what was happening there, but hopefully Zoom managed to warm up as we went through. If anyone has missed any points and wants to ask us any questions, please feel free to drop us a line and we'll get back to you. So looking at some of the questions that we've had, the first one was, when will the fundraising report be published? So actually, Zach, you've been working on that, so you're probably best to answer.
Yeah, I'll take that one. And so we expect the report to be published around August time. There's not a specific date set in stone as of now, but in terms of the report itself, we'll be looking to explore former and current fundraising attitudes and their experiences, and also looking at who's interested in joining fundraising in the future, both as a career or as a volunteer. But you'll hear about this much more nearer to the time. And if you've opted in for marketing emails, then you should get updates about this when the report is released.
Great, thanks, Zach. There was a question about finance and why did the salary and finance drop? Actually, James has answered that on the chat. So if anyone is interested, have a look at his answer there. We have another question. Why are remote roles so much more popular with candidates?
Yeah, so I could take that one as well. So we think this is essentially coming down to flexibility. Remote roles give candidates more control over how and when and where they work, and therefore can improve their work-life balance alongside reducing things like commuting costs as well. Also, we think it makes it more accessible to certain candidates, so i.e. those that maybe aren't able to commute regularly, whether that's due to caring responsibilities, disability, or location. So those candidates can still apply. And overall, we think nowadays candidates see flexibility as actually not just a perk, but as an expectation with the roles.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to the next one. Do we expect the recruiter-led market to continue further into this year and potentially beyond? I don't know which one of you wants to pick that up, Jinsha?
Yeah, I can pick that up. Yeah, so I think at least in the near term, so our data shows a continued decline in job postings alongside an increase in candidate activity, as we just saw in the job categories. But I think unless we see a meaningful rise in vacancies or a drop in candidate demand, I think this will probably carry on further into 2026. But that said, the outlook isn't certain, and things could change if hiring demand picks up or the economic conditions shift. But yeah, for now, I think it does seem that recruiters do have an upper hand as they have a larger pool of candidates to choose from.
Great, thank you very much. We also have a question here. How should charities adapt their hiring strategies in this type of market?
Oh, this is a good question. I can take this one as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think charities should focus on getting the basics right. So kind of having clear job descriptions, transparent salaries, and a streamlined hiring process. So I think that not only improves the candidate experience, but also kind of helps you identify the right people a bit more quickly and efficiently as well. And I think it's also important to remember that it's not just salary. That's not the only important factor. Our benefits survey also shows that candidates place values on things like flexible working hours and location, organizational culture and other things as well. So even if you can't always compete on salary, I think offering these benefits to candidates that candidates actually care about can make a real difference in attracting and retaining talent.
Great, thank you, Jinsha. There are all the questions that we have for the moment, but obviously as you sort of go away and ingest the information and look at the report, if anyone has any further questions, we're very, very happy to answer those. So whenever you think of anything, please do just drop us a line. And now I'll hand you back to Zach.
Perfect. Thank you. So we'll wrap up now. Thank you everyone for attending today and for purchasing the 2026 salary report. We'll be sharing a copy of the slides and recording later today, and we'd really appreciate if you could take a moment to complete a very short feedback survey on the 2026 salary report, which will be included. We recommend that you use our salary checker tool and to help you with any benchmarking and specific breakdowns by location and job title. And you can always speak to your account managers when you need help with this. And if you haven't already, please sign up to our Recruiter Insights blog and keep your eyes peeled for more on future webinars. Cool. So thanks again, and we hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you very much.